Witnessing my husband's selfish claim over the house of my late father, with whom we were living, as he declares, "I'm going to make my father-in-law's house mine. Can you really not understand anything?" My husband's shallow remark made me laugh beyond surprise. Seeing my long underestimated husband's family cornered by my retaliation. I, Katie Manning, had been living with my father and my husband, Ben. Since my mother passed away when I was in high school, my father raised me with endless love. My deep affection for my father remains unchanged. When I proposed living with my increasingly worrisome father to Ben, he warmly welcomed the idea of us living together in our home. "Are you really okay with this?" "I can manage on my own," my father asked me anxiously, a concern stemming from our cohabitation proposal. When I suggested living together, he initially smiled happily but soon looked worried. "I am always worried I might be a burden to you." My father always considered my feelings. However, after I expressed my desire to stay with him and Ben agreed, my father accepted with a smile. Today, Ben and I are moving into my childhood home. We began unpacking the boxes brought by the movers. "Again with this? Haven't I always said this is what I wanted?" "You're right, Dad. Plus, this place has better access to work, which is also convenient for me." We explained, and my father nodded with a faint smile. After unpacking, we found my father had prepared coffee for us. I was about to take a coffee break when I heard footsteps coming downstairs. "I thought you might want a break, so I prepared some for you too." Grateful for the warm hospitality, Ben and I enjoyed a break with him, feeling happy about the enriched life that lay ahead. After a short rest, we resumed unpacking, rolling up our sleeves for another push. "Hey, if you want, you can quit your job. It's okay to stay and support your father." During the work, Ben made a surprising proposal, pausing me in astonishment. "What do you mean?" "Think about it. Moving back here, we've cut down on our rent expenses, right? If you quit your job, taking care of your father and having fewer worries might be better, right?" Currently, both of us work, with me mainly handling household chores. Though Ben helps sometimes, our days are still quite busy. I mulled over Ben's suggestion, feeling delighted at the prospect of spending more time with my father. Moreover, focusing on household chores seemed like it would reduce both mental and physical stress. Ben's proposal was very appealing, but it meant becoming financially dependent on him, which worried me. Grateful for his acceptance of the cohabitation, I pondered whether I should rely on Ben further. With a change of living environment, we decided to continue as before for now. Ben said, "I don't want you to overdo it, but the cohabitation proposal was mine." I felt I couldn't always depend on Ben. A month has passed. "Hey, maybe quitting your job for your father's sake is the best after all." When Ben suggested this again, I also thought it might be the best course of action. Living together turned out to lighten my daily load unexpectedly, mainly because my father took on household chores. Returning home, I found my father had already prepared dinner or cleaned the house. Yet, this seemed to increase his burden, making me feel guilty and contemplate quitting my job to take over the chores. "Yeah, I might do that. I feel bad putting financial pressure on you, Ben. What are you thinking?" "There's no need to worry about that." Hearing those words, I made up my mind to quit my job. When I told my father about this decision, he urged me to continue working and leave the household chores to him. But after expressing my desire to help with the chores, he understood. As a result, I chose to quit my job and dedicate myself to our home, leading to more fulfilling days spent with my father. However, gradually, changes began to appear in our lives. "I'm home. Welcome back, Ben. It must have been a tough day." "Yeah. Is dinner ready?" Ben's return home became later, and by the time he got back, my father was already asleep, decreasing the opportunities for us to eat together. Today, I was watching TV with Dad, but "Can you keep it down? I'm eating." "Oh, sorry." When my father is nearby, Ben is as kind as he used to be, But lately, when it's just the two of us, he becomes quite cold. I feel like my quitting the job has added stress on him, and all I can do is apologize. After Ben finishes his dinner, I start to prepare his favorite evening drink, but he gets up to leave the dining area. "Where are you going?" "What about your drink?" "I'm going to take a bath," he answered shortly and left, closing the door behind him with a bang. Whether he's in a bad mood or simply tired, these days leave me unable to help but sigh. The next day, I wait for Ben's return after my father has gone to sleep, but even past midnight, he hasn't come home. Worried, I try calling him but get no response. Just as I start to panic, thinking something has happened, an email arrives. "What?" The cold text of the email seemed to convey his feelings. Despite sighing, I felt relieved that he was safe. "Still at work?" I was worried because it's late. I replied, and his response came quickly. "On a business trip." Those few words let me know he wouldn't be coming home tonight. I hadn't been informed about the trip, and I wish he had told me sooner, but expressing that might only irritate him further. "So, you're on a business trip, got it. How long will you be away?" I sent this message, but no reply came. After that, Ben's business trips became more frequent, and he stopped telling me when he would leave or return home. My father, trying to be considerate, would ask about the situation when Ben was home, and he would answer with a cheerful smile that no longer seemed directed at me. "No problem, I'm working hard for our family." Seeing his reaction made me feel like he was dissatisfied with me, and though I suggested we talk, he would say, "I'm just busy," or "I'm tired. Let's talk later," and we never had a serious discussion. Eventually, Ben rarely returned home. Amidst growing distrust, I began to suspect he might be having an affair when I unexpectedly received a message from my mother-in-law. "I need the address of the company Ben works for." A one-line email without any greetings. My in-laws have not been fond of me since the beginning of our marriage, throwing harsh words and malicious actions my way, leading to a natural distance between us. Ben understood this situation, and although it never worsened our relationship due to my in-laws' issues, it didn't improve either, and we continued to keep our distance. Receiving this sudden email from my mother-in-law, I pondered its intent before replying. "It's been a while. May I know why you need Ben's work address?" After sending this reply, it seemed she was indeed upset, as I immediately received an angry call. "Hello, it's been a while." It's been a while. You've made Ben take care of your father and quit your job to do nothing at home. How can you do such a thing? Because of you, he's now returned to our house. He forgot his lunchbox today and went to the office, so I'm trying to deliver it. What are you going to do about this attitude? It's unforgivable. Give me the address right away. And from now on, Ben will be living at our house." Shocked by my mother-in-law's angry words, I was left speechless. It turned out that the days Ben claimed to be away on business trips, he had actually returned to his parents' home. Learning how my in-laws spoke about me was deeply shocking. It was Ben who said it would be okay for me to quit my job, yet I couldn't help but feel his true intentions were different. Overwhelmed with sadness, I felt like I couldn't stop my tears. Without arguing, I simply provided Ben's work address and ended the call. Trying to calm myself, I made some coffee in the living room when my father came in. Asking him if he would like some coffee with a smile as usual, he looked at me, smiled back, and accepted. As we enjoyed our coffee, my father started talking about the past. "Your mom and I used to argue a lot when we were young. There were many misunderstandings, but we always tried to be honest with each other, and that's how we solved many issues. Couples who can argue and then fix their relationship might understand each other better and become stronger," he said warmly. His words deeply resonated with me, and I decided to have a serious conversation with Ben. "That's true, Dad?" "Thank you," I told him, and he responded with a kind smile. Afterward, I sent an email to Ben outlining the facts from my conversation with his mother and expressing my desire to talk. However, Ben replied dismissively, making me sigh deeply. Anger towards Ben began to build inside me. I wanted to respond immediately in my emotional state, but took a deep breath to calm myself. This situation led to Ben stopping his contributions to our household finances. Attempts to contact him were met with silence, and messages about living expenses were ignored. My love for him gradually faded due to his selfish behavior. Finding no meaning in our marriage, thoughts of divorce crossed my mind. I was disappointed in Ben for being so irresponsible and self-centered. However, not wanting to worry my father further, I decided to postpone discussions about divorce and support myself using my savings from before we were married. Getting used to Ben's absence, I enjoyed my days with my father until he suddenly fell ill. Rushed to the hospital, we were told he didn't have much time left. Overwhelmed and unable to stop my tears, I couldn't hear the doctors or nurses. Visiting my father's room, he tried to smile and apologized for worrying me. Holding his hand, I smiled back, saying, "Don't worry, you'll get better," despite my eyes swelling with tears. Seeing my father, who looked sad despite laughing and asking, "What's with that face?" I felt tears welling up in my eyes again. Because hospitalization was necessary, I temporarily returned home to prepare what was needed. However, upon returning to my childhood home alone, I was overwhelmed by a sense of loneliness, and I couldn't stop my tears. This house, where I grew up since I was a child. Even though I had left it when I got married, this place is filled with countless memories. Unable to bear the loneliness of being alone, I simply cried incessantly. During this difficult time, I received a cold message from Ben. "Since we're living separately, handle your own expenses. Maybe use your father-in-law's pension?" Reading this, I threw my phone in frustration. All my feelings for Ben vanished at that moment. Shaken by anger and sorrow, I realized dwelling on my feelings for Ben was a waste. Wondering how my father would feel seeing me like this calmed my mind. Regaining my composure, I washed my face and prepared to leave for the hospital. Just then, I received mail containing good news that could change my current situation. Seeing this, I made up my mind. Leaving the documents at home for now, I hurried to the hospital. My father's condition worsened gradually, and I had to accept that our time to say goodbye was nearing. Days passed with joyous conversations at the hospital, only to return home to tears. Eventually, my father passed away peacefully. I was there to witness his serene departure, but the sense of loss overwhelmed me, leaving me in tears. However, the legacy my father left was immeasurable and deeply etched in my heart. The funeral, with the help of relatives, went smoothly, but Ben and my in-laws did not show up until the end. I hadn't specifically informed them about my father's passing, so I hadn't expected them to attend. Nonetheless, it seemed they had learned of his death through relatives because, a few days after settling the estate and paperwork, Ben suddenly appeared with a lot of luggage. "It's been a while. I heard your father passed away." Seeing Ben's face stirred anger within me, but I suppressed the impulse and took a deep breath to remain calm. "What do you want? What's with the luggage? Isn't that a bit harsh for a husband returning home?" "Oh, this luggage is my parents' stuff." "Huh?" The fact that Ben used the word husband was profoundly irritating. His words made no sense to me. After he had left the house, stopped providing for living expenses, and lived as he pleased, claiming now to be a husband was beyond surprising. It was appalling. I was at a loss for words. Were you waiting for me? Jobless, struggling with living expenses, and left alone to care for your father? Happy, are you? So happy you're speechless? No, it seems I was the one caught in your plan. Ben's mention of a plan caught my attention, prompting me to ask for clarification. The answer I received was unbelievable. Living with an old man was something I couldn't accept. Impossible to live with the elderly. But saying that might make you think about divorce. If we divorced, I couldn't get this house. So, I chose to live together and pushed you into unemployment by pretending to be the ideal husband, making you dependent on me and the elderly man. That way, the house would become mine. Hearing his words, I found myself glaring at Ben sharply. This was not normal thinking. Reflecting on our marriage made me despise myself and feel deep guilt towards my father. I struggled to contain my trembling anger. Your story doesn't add up. You're the one who left and stopped paying the living expenses. When I pointed this out, Ben scratched his head in annoyance. Yeah, I had reached my limit. I didn't realize I was so short-tempered. But I thought the plan would work even without me, assuming you wouldn't have the courage to bring up divorce. His smug smile made me forget what had ever attracted me to him. I no longer wanted to see his face or hear his voice. My feelings towards Ben had become unbearable. The plan worked. This house might be old, but it's spacious and well located. It'll be worth a lot when sold. From today, my parents and I will live here. Could there be anyone more self-centered? It seemed morality was foreign to him, which wasn't surprising considering his parents. As I stood dumbfounded, he continued to insult me further. The house of your father is mine. Get out. Watching my in-laws' belongings being moved in, I realized Ben was completely oblivious to the situation. Ben looked down on me confidently, disrespecting my father and making it impossible to leave things as they were. Seeing Ben standing there so smugly made me burst into laughter, unable to hold it back. My sudden laughter confused Ben. Have you lost your mind? That's the perfect description for you. The thought of confronting him with reality made my laughter uncontrollable. Seeing me laugh, Ben became furious. However, ignoring his reaction, I laid out the reality. Don't you know? This is my house. It could never become yours. Surprised and frozen by my words, I continued. Besides, you and I are now unrelated. Didn't your mother tell you? Laughing as I said this, Ben seemed utterly stunned. Then, he immediately started contacting someone on his smartphone, apparently his mother. What, Mom? Katie's saying something weird. We haven't divorced, have we? She said I hadn't heard anything from you. What do you mean, you sent it? Really? How did this happen? Watching Ben's speechless reaction, it seemed he finally grasped the situation. After ending the call, Ben's expression was twisted as if he was looking at something incomprehensible. Did you really submit a divorce application? He asked. Yes, I did. The day your father was taken to the hospital, your mother sent me a completed divorce form by post, which I happily submitted the next day. Your mother has her moments, doesn't she? I replied. Damn it. Even if it arrived, you weren't supposed to submit it. It was something my mother made me write just in case, not intending to actually divorce. Ben was furious. But you filled it out yourself, didn't you? Whether or not you intended to doesn't matter. I completed the divorce process as you wished, so you should be thanking me, I calmly retorted. Seeing Ben frustrated, I felt a sense of relief inside. The divorce form from my mother-in-law might have been intended as harassment, but for me, wanting a divorce, it was a stroke of luck. Later, Ben anxiously questioned me about property division and the house's ownership, but I dismissed his concerns. It was clear there were no significant assets to divide, so I informed him there was no need for division. I explained that due to the short cohabitation period with my father and the assets being in my father's name at the time of the divorce, they were not subject to division. Ben insisted on a financial demand, claiming even my savings from before marriage should be split, but I informed him his claims had no basis. He turned pale, attempting to argue but only opening and closing his mouth, resembling a fish out of water. Though tempted to mock him, I chose to maintain a mature demeanor and calm myself. Let's send this here. It's problematic for someone to bring their belongings into another person's home uninvited, which clearly constitutes trespassing. If you plan to stay any longer, I'll have to call the police. As I said this, Ben hurriedly gathered his belongings and left. I spread salt at the entrance and prayed to my parents' portraits. This is for the best. I'll become stronger, so please watch over me. Thinking of my parents meeting again in heaven eased my loneliness and lightened my heart. Emboldened by this new resolve, I began looking for a job. It was then that a friend contacted me, knowing I was job hunting, and offered to introduce me to a job that matched my expertise. Thanks to their recommendation, I quickly secured a position after an interview with HR. A few days later, I received a message from Ben. Sorry for being stubborn the other day. Actually, I wanted to start over with you, which is why I came to the house. Finding the message unbelievable, I struggled with how to reply but ultimately decided to ignore it. Yet, Ben continued to send poetic messages like a relentless suitor. Once, we were like the sun and the moon. Days spent longing for you, unreachable, are now behind us. Now, we can be closer. Without your love, I'm nothing. Won't you give me your overflowing love once more? I'll dedicate everything to you. I treasure you more than anything. Our love will last forever. No matter where I am, I'll continue to love you, for your heart is my home. Each time I received these poetic messages, I shared them with colleagues, wondering if they could serve as material for work. Currently working as an illustrator in a cartoon editorial department, these emails sometimes prove to be useful inspiration. Look, the melodramatic stalker is back. It's great to have something to laugh about in tough times. Unknowingly, Ben has become a source of amusement. Feeling only discomfort from his messages, I've been avoiding replying. Amid these days, the doorbell at my home rang. Looking through the peephole, I saw Ben standing outside. I had never expected him to show up in person, so I decided to call the police immediately. "Hey, I know you're in there. I can see your car. Please, just listen to me. I'm really in trouble right now. There was talk of moving into this house, so my parents sold their home. Now, I have nowhere to go. Help me." I could hear his voice shouting from outside, but what does that have to do with me? It highlights his recklessness for not correcting the situation the day they misunderstood this house as their own. His emails showed he hadn't given up, but I was merely astonished by his and his family's naive thinking. While the police were convincing Ben to leave, he resisted strongly but was eventually taken away by them. After that, when there was no response to the flood of Romeo emails, contacts from my in-laws began. At first, they tried calling, but when I ignored that, they switched to emails. "How can you know we're in a difficult situation and not offer any help? You should contact us immediately. Why not have a serious discussion? We were once a family. Isn't it too cruel to be so indifferent? You caused us to lose our home. Now we live in a dilapidated apartment. Why won't you hand over the house? You must have received inheritance from your father. You're not struggling financially. We quit our jobs. You should take responsibility. If the child is like this, of course, the parents are too. Do they think their decisions will always prevail?" I was infuriated by the audacious emails. How can they disregard others to such an extent? Although I intended to ignore them, I ended up blocking Ben and my in-laws' contacts. I considered changing my contact information, but it felt ridiculous to spend money just because of them. I was determined to ignore them, but I reached my limit. I optimistically thought blocking them would restore my peace, but soon realized my approach was short-sighted. One day, my former in-laws showed up at my doorstep. Despite being fed up with their endless harassment, understanding they knew my address made me realize such incidents were inevitable. However, I did not want to leave this house filled with many memories. "Come out, you know we're in trouble. Change your mood? I'm proposing we get back together, accept it. How can you ignore someone in trouble? What kind of human does that?" The doorbell and knocking were incessant, but I did not hesitate to call the police. Suddenly, the noise from outside stopped. Peeking through the hole, I saw an unfamiliar man arguing with my former in-laws. "Go home, you're bothering people." The sudden appearance of the man puzzled my former in-laws. "What did you say? Who are you?" Could it be an affair partner? Unfazed by their backlash, the man looked at them coldly. "Your attitude is the problem. Look around. This is a residential area. Look, people are gathering because of you. You're really causing a disturbance." Indeed, through the limited view of the peephole, I could see neighbors gathering, which felt somewhat embarrassing. However, seeing my former family flustered and stuttering but, was when the police arrived. It seemed one of the officers had encountered this scene before, saying to Ben, "It's you guys again." Hearing this, my former in-laws' faces turned red. "How much trouble are you going to cause? Get some awareness." I silently thanked the man as he walked away, relieved. Afterward, my former in-laws were taken away in a police vehicle, and the onlookers dispersed. Hours later, the doorbell rang again, and peering through the peephole, I saw the man from the earlier argument standing there. Surprised to see him, I hesitated before cautiously opening the door. The man greeted me with a warm smile. "It's been a while. If you were back, you should have let me know." I recognized his face, but I couldn't immediately recall who he was until he reintroduced himself. "Don't tell me you've forgotten. It's been over 10 years, after all. Remember me? I'm Scott." Hearing his name, memories flooded back. Scott, my childhood friend, known as Scotty in our hometown. Scotty. Now that you mention it, you really are Scotty. Scott used to live next door and we hadn't seen each other since changing elementary schools. Finally remembered, I've moved back to the area. We're neighbors again. It's really been a long time. And thank you for earlier. It meant a lot to me. After expressing my gratitude again, Scott just laughed it off, making me smile too. We caught up on old times, and I ended up telling him about the recent disturbances. Scott promised to support me whenever needed, proving to be a reliable friend. When I mentioned my father's passing, Scott offered to pay his respects, remembering him from our childhood. The joy of having someone who shared my past was profound. Days passed, and I received a letter from a law firm out of the blue containing a notification. Opening the unexpected envelope, I found it claimed I had committed infidelity during my marriage, demanding payment for damages. Shocked by the situation, I noticed a message from an unknown email address on my smartphone titled regarding the notification. The message read, "Your ex-husband Ben has initiated a lawsuit claiming marital infidelity on your part. Admitting and dealing with this straightforwardly will avoid escalating the matter. We plan to inform your workplace. Considering your future, we advise settling this matter promptly," suggesting a threat. It was clear this was a scheme by my former in-laws, not a genuine liar's notification. Upon closer inspection, the quality of the notification raised doubts about its authenticity, prompting me to consult a real liar. The lawyer confirmed it was a complete forgery, and the supposed attorney's name was not registered, revealing the document as fake. Despite knowing better, I decided to play along in my reply, indicating a willingness to consider their claims but asking for evidence of my supposed infidelity. "The alleged mental anguish suffered by Ben is immense, and we seek compensation for that," they replied, without any tangible proof. Such baseless claims seemed unlikely to involve legal professionals. I assert there was no infidelity on my part, hence no evidence exists. It's hard to believe professionals would intervene based on such unfounded claims, wouldn't you agree? Moved by Ben's passion, we wish to assist him. We expect your sincere cooperation, not intending to escalate this matter further. Quite an emotional approach for a professional. You're aware impersonating a lawyer is illegal and punishable, right? Just to confirm, you do hold legitimate qualifications? This inquiry halted their previously prompt responses. Curious about the next move, I received a new email. "I am indeed a professional. However, your arguments were unbeatable. We've decided to withdraw the lawsuit. No need for withdrawal, as I have no passion for this matter and am entirely calm about being falsely accused of infidelity. I intend to legally counter this. Looking forward to meeting this passionate lawyer in court." After this exchange, all communication ceased. However, the silence did not last long as my former in-laws once again showed up at my house. Despite it being late at night, they started begging loudly at the front door, "We made a mistake. Please spare us from the lawsuit." Awakened by the noise, I checked the time and it was past 1 a.m. Anger at being deprived of sleep reached its peak, and I yelled, "Please be quiet. Stop bothering me." Never having seen me so angry before, my former in-laws couldn't hide their surprise. "If you come any closer and cause more trouble, I won't overlook it." With that declaration and grabbing my father's wooden sword that was at hand, my former in-laws' expressions changed drastically. Especially my former mother-in-law and Ben, who seemed to tremble in fear, whispering, "We're so sorry. You should have changed your actions from the beginning if you were sorry. Never appear before me again." I scolded, and my former mother-in-law nodded with tears in her eyes. Then, the lights of a patrol car caught my eye, heading our way. Due to the late hour, it seemed neighbors had reported them, and my former in-laws were immediately taken away by the arriving officers. They tried to attack me with a wooden sword. My former mother-in-law pointed at me and appealed to the police, but she was taken away. When the police asked me, "Is this true?" I explained the doorbell kept ringing and someone was banging on the door at this hour, so I took the wooden sword for self-defense, to which they nodded understandingly. Scott was by my side and told the police he had witnessed the former in-law's repeated visits. With his testimony, the police deemed the actions malicious and promptly took my former in-laws away, finally restoring peace. The next day, following Scott's advice, I filed a report. With multiple incidents involving the police already, the process went smoothly. Scott mentioned he had noticed the former in-law's assault the previous night and was about to say something when he heard me shouting. According to him, my voice was terrifying. Subsequently, a restraining order was issued against my former in-laws, and they never troubled me again. Moreover, someone had recorded the commotion, and the footage ended up on the internet, making them the secret talk of the neighborhood, unable to move due to lack of financial means. It's unclear how they're living now, but they're probably relying on the former in-law's retirement funds. As for me, Scott and I grew closer rapidly, and within a few months of reuniting, he confessed his love and we started dating. Scott always makes me smile, and the time he spent with him is genuinely happy. I feel like this turn of events is a gift from my father, filling me with gratitude. After my father, who lived in an enviably luxurious mansion, passed away, my mother-in-law made an unbelievable statement as if she had been waiting for this moment. "This house is really wonderful, but we should get rid of the pictures of strangers soon." I couldn't hide my surprise at my mother-in-law's comment. Huh? Perhaps you haven't heard from Ben yet? We're going to live here from now on. What? Here. Why? We and Ben will live in this house. What? When I looked at my husband in a hurry, he was smiling sarcastically. Well, it's fine for you to live in this residence too. We'll live here together, you and my family. You're the only daughter of the owner of this house, your father, so it's only natural that you'll inherit it, right? I've been looking forward to this moment for a long time. From now on, you'll take care of my father in this luxurious place. Faced with such an absurd demand, I even lost the will to resist. Fine, do whatever you want with this house. If you want to live here, please do. While my husband laughed loudly, my daughter quietly spoke. But Mom, didn't Grandpa say he wanted this mansion to be demolished after he passed away? Yes, but if your dad and his parents want to live here, that's fine, no? My daughter said with a cold gaze at her father. That's right. Enjoy it while you can. I, Kathy, am 58 years old. I always visit my hometown on weekends. In my hometown, time passes slowly as usual. The only view from the window of my parents' home is the endlessly vast sea. This residence is located on the coastline, creating the illusion that it is directly connected to the sea. My father, sitting in a chair by the window, quietly muttered with the sunset behind him. This might be the last time I see this scenery. My father, who is over 80 years old, has weakened and struggles even while standing up. He aged rapidly after losing my mother 3 years ago. Until recently, he was immersed in sorrow, but now, realizing his end is near, he seems somewhat at peace. He was hospitalized for a long time due to an illness, but now he's back home. Recently, with the support of home care, he's been managing to live alone at home. I can only visit on weekends because of my job. It might be time to go to a care facility, but I want to stay here. Kathy, I'm sorry for the trouble. It's okay. This place is important to you and Mom. Remember how we always went to the seaside as a family? We enjoyed barbecues in the garden too. That's really nostalgic. This summer, we should all gather here again. I hesitated and middled my words. When summer comes, I'll probably be with Mom, my father said with a slightly sad smile. I promise to visit again next week and headed home. The place I currently live in is an old 3-room apartment in a housing complex. Whenever I leave my hometown, I feel oppressed by the cluttered and narrow space in my apartment. It's mostly filled with my husband's belongings, which are more like long-abandoned unnecessary items. But touching them would only provoke his anger. When will dinner be ready? My husband asked, glued to the TV, sipping his beer. Did you go to your father's house again? It's strange for a woman nearing 60 to be so devoted to her father every week. I'm worried about my dad's health. Is that wrong? Don't make excuses. But I guess I can understand why you go to that house. My husband smirked and indicated he agreed. Then Ben, you should also visit sometimes. You owe it to him. Dad doesn't have much time left. There's no fun in going there. It's not like the old days when he'd welcome us with plenty of drinks. My presence won't extend your father's life, but if I were into surfing, it would have been valuable as a holiday house where I could stay for free. That mansion is truly magnificent. My husband, clearly not the surfing type, laughed while lying down. Even such a sarcastic husband always spoke highly of my family home. There's no doubt that it was a magnificent mansion. I didn't particularly notice it growing up, but as an adult, I came to realize the luxury of my childhood home. The third-floor living room, bathed in light, was spacious enough for children to play chase. My parents, who were very sociable, had a total of 5 rooms on the first and second floors, often hosting friends. As a child, I had many happy memories from sleepovers with friends. My parents were always cheerful and welcoming to everyone. But now, it's okay. I'll just visit with Abby sometimes. Do you not think that inconveniences me? Planning to leave me with nothing but cold leftovers? If you must visit your folks, I'll eat out. Just give me $100 for the meal. My whole body suddenly became hot. Staying any longer with my husband, I feared I might blurt out angry words, so I quietly escaped to the bathroom. Washing my face roughly, I tried to mask my rage. But looking at the mirror, I was shocked to see my reflection. I looked older than I had imagined. I work full-time during the week and spend weekends visiting my father. But I'm busy with household chores even then. My daughter, Abby, is in high school and doesn't require much attention. But it seems my fatigue has been accumulating without my notice. At what point will this lifestyle end? I thought, with my husband's face flashing across my mind. It looked like he was the main source of my exhaustion. At that moment, my cell phone in my pocket began to ring. It was my mother-in-law, persistent by nature, calling repeatedly until I answered. Despite having a bad feeling, I pressed the answer button. Hello, Kathy? I heard that you have been leaving Ben behind to visit your hometown frequently. Who's taking care of Ben while you're away? She accused without pause. You have always neglected Abby when working, and now you're neglecting your husband too? What a terrible wife. My husband must have shared his grievances with her. To him, his mother was an unwavering supporter. I'm sorry, but my father has been unwell, so I'm dedicating my weekends to caring for him. If he's unwell, he should be in a facility or hospital. But that would be a financial burden. But then again, it'd be problematic if he died alone in that house. Sigh, having one's life unnecessarily prolonged is also troublesome. She probably knows that my father's time is limited. Yet, such remarks filled me with disdain beyond anger. Fortunately, my daughter was supportive, frequently accompanying me to visit my father and helping with simple chores at home. Only my husband was indifferent to chores like dealing with laundry left out in the rain. He saw household tasks as the wife's responsibility and never helped. Moreover, he recently complained about the cooking being lousy and dust accumulating at home. I couldn't help but think, is visiting my father once a week too much? These were clearly the result of his sarcastic remarks on my visits home, but I didn't want to have regrets. Months passed, and my father peacefully left this world. One morning, while my daughter and I were visiting my father, we found him collapsed on the third-floor balcony. His favorite spot, the expansive balcony, offered an unobstructed view of the sea. I'm glad he got to spend his last days at home, as he wished. The funeral proceeded hastily, leaving little time for mourning. In the end, Ben and the in-laws didn't bother to attend, did they? The funeral was set on a weekday, so my husband said he had work, and the in-laws declared, if Ben can't go, we won't attend either. However, upon returning to the mansion after the funeral, my husband and in-laws were there. Did you finish work early to come here? If you were quicker, you might have been able to send off my father. I'm not interested in that. What? Then why are you here? My husband confidently sat down onto the sofa in the living room. The in-laws, who hadn't visited in a long time, meticulously inspected the house, even turning picture frames on the shelves face down. This house is really wonderful, but we should get rid of the pictures of strangers soon. I couldn't hide my astonishment at my mother-in-law's comment. Huh? Perhaps you haven't heard from Ben yet? We're going to live here from now on. What? Here? Why? We and Ben will live in this house. What? When I looked at my husband in a hurry, he was smiling sarcastically. They were trying to take over my family home. Hey, don't look at me like I'm the enemy. I'm not trying to take anything from you. What do you mean? Well, it's fine for you to live in this residence too. We'll live here together, you and my family. You're the only daughter of the owner of this house, your father, so it's only natural that you'll inherit it, right? I've been looking forward to this moment for a long time. From now on, you'll take care of my father in this luxurious place. His demand was absurd. Struggling to find words, my father-in-law spoke as if it were obvious. I heard that you have been taking care of your father every weekend. If you enjoy caregiving so much, I'm counting on you. My knees have started to hurt recently, but he was walking without any problem. It seemed he was using caregiving as an excuse. What he really wanted was help with the housework. My mother-in-law also smiled maliciously at me. Since it's decided, let's all live happily together. It feels like a dream come true to be able to live in this mansion. Things progressed without waiting for my response. Not only me, but my daughter was also dumbfounded, faced with such an unreasonable claim. I completely lost the will to resist. Fine, do whatever you want with this house. If you want to live here, please do. Smiles appeared on my husband's and his parents' faces. Seeing that, I spoke with even more determination. But Abby and I won't live here. Please, go ahead. While taking my daughter's hand, I urged her, let's go, Abby. Really? Okay. It'll be less stressful and more comfortable without you here. Ha ha ha. My husband laughed loudly. I was treated like a housemaid. Easily discarded. Apparently, just acquiring the mansion was satisfying enough for them. They were laughing loudly. While my husband laughed, my daughter quietly spoke up. But Mom, didn't Grandpa say he wanted this mansion to be demolished after he passed away? Yes, but if your dad and his parents want to live here, that's fine, no? My daughter said with a cold gaze at her father. That's right. Enjoy it while you can. 3 months later, the situation drastically changed. The house is in trouble. My husband urgently contacted me. When I rushed to the scene, it was just as I expected. The house was leaning. The walls were cracked. Why is this happening? More notably, the vast terrace connected to the third-floor living room was gone. Where did the terrace go? I asked. We removed it because your father passed away there. We wanted to get rid of the discomfort. That's why the house is leaning. The house leaning is related to the removal of the terrace? That can't be. At this rate, the house might collapse. Hearing that, I sighed quietly. The plan was to demolish this house after my father passed away, so it doesn't matter if it's falling apart. It can't be okay if it's falling apart. We are living here. My husband and in-laws blamed me. They still didn't seem to understand how serious the situation of the house was. My mother-in-law approached me aggressively. How can you say it's okay if it's falling apart? It's your irreplaceable childhood home, Kathy. Do something about it. There's nothing I can do. This house is infested with termites, I explained, and they shook their heads in disbelief. After losing my mother, my father lost his drive and was unable to maintain the house. He was in the hospital for a while, and the house was untouched for about 2 years. I ventilated it occasionally, but I never noticed any termite infestation. Although the house looked splendid from the outside, the interior was crumbling. When my father and I learned about it, we were initially shocked, but my father quickly changed his perspective. What's important is not the building itself, but that the memories continue to live in our hearts, he said. My father's remaining time was short, and he accepted the house's condition without making any special efforts, as his days in it were numbered. No matter how damaged, the house wouldn't collapse immediately unless there was a major earthquake. However, removing the balcony might have caused the house to lose its balance, I mentioned, and my husband turned red with anger and yelled, "How dare you leave us in such a dangerous house?" My mother-in-law continued, "We were deceived by you. You lured us into living in this crumbling ruin. What were you scheming? Such a wicked daughter-in-law." Despite being harshly criticized, I didn't offer them the house myself. You forcibly took it over, and now that there's an issue, it's my fault? I don't recall encouraging you to live here. If you're dissatisfied, feel free to leave. We don't want this rundown house. We'll move out immediately. My mother-in-law glared at me, her harsh words unending. The house was luxurious only in appearance and no substance. As compensation for deceiving us, you should pay for our moving costs. Fortunately, we haven't unpacked yet and most of our belongings are still on the first floor. I want to leave this place quickly. Are you by any chance using the large room next to the entrance as a storage space? Yes, that's right. You left your belongings in that room? Oh dear. My mother-in-law, puzzled by my reaction, stared at me. Sensing something from my troubled look, she quickly ran down to the first floor. Soon after, we heard a scream, "Ah!" I found my mother-in-law looking depressed in the storage room on the first floor. Did you know the room was moldy? Since my father became ill and the house was vacant for a long time, this room became prone to mold due to the dampness of not getting enough sunlight. As expected, the cardboard boxes were damp and the bottoms were covered in mold. My luxury bags. My mother-in-law lifted a mold-covered bag. Wait a minute, my precious records. My father-in-law's record covers were also damaged by mold. What about my comics? Their valuable items were all moldy. Naturally, their anger was directed at me, but I refrained from arguing. You were the ones who occupied this house without permission. They eventually gave up on their mold-infested belongings and returned to the cluttered three-room apartment. The three of them headed to that apartment because the in-laws' former apartment had already been given away. Huh? It's messy as usual but seems somewhat tidier. My husband muttered, tilting his head. My daughter and I passed by my husband and left the house. Maybe it looks spacious because all our stuff is gone. We're leaving this place. What? My husband was surprised. Yes. And I want you to sign this document, I said, handing him the divorce papers. As my husband raised objections, my in-laws yelled, "Ditch that woman." And I managed to get the signature. In those 3 months, my daughter and I found a new home and prepared for the divorce. The moment they showed their true colors, I felt relieved to sever ties with them. Their scheme to take over my family home ended in a monumental failure as the house collapsed. I heard that my hot-tempered in-laws and husband were constantly fighting in their small apartment. Just a few days after the divorce, it already felt like a distant world to me. The leaning family home was eventually demolished. The grand mansion I inherited from my father gave me the courage to take a new step forward, despite my grievances with my husband. It prompted the change I was hesitant to make. Now, 10 years later, I live together with my daughter's family, in our new, small house by the sea. Grandma, let's go to the sea, my grandchild said. All right, everyone, have you got your hats and floaties ready? Then let's go. I responded, and as my grandchildren pulled my hands, we headed to the sea once again. I've sold this house to my parents. Let's get a divorce. I don't need you anymore. Phil pointed at me, urging me to leave the house quickly. After that, he continued to throw insulting words at me. My in-laws joined in, laughing along. However, I remained undisturbed by such comments and calmly accepted the need to leave. I had a plan. After quickly preparing my belongings, I left the house. Those three still didn't understand the true hardship that was about to unfold. My name is Rachel Wagner. I'm in my 50s. After many years of marriage, my children are already independent. Although I used to work as a regular office worker, I am now a teacher of handmade accessory making, a hobby of mine thanks to a friend's introduction. For me, getting this job was a stroke of luck. I enjoy my beloved craft, surrounded by kind and caring students. While some may frown upon continuing a hobby as a profession, I feel fortunate to be in such a wonderful environment. I met Phil at the company where I used to work. Although we were at different companies, frequent interactions due to business dealings led to a mutual attraction that led to dating and eventually marriage. 3 years after getting married, I gave birth to a healthy boy. He graduated from a top university and secured a job at a major company. He now lives with his very attractive wife. As a parent, I feel unparalleled joy. However, my daily life took a turn for the worse. Decades into our marriage, with our child out on his own, Phil's once gentle nature had vanished. Hey, Rachel, isn't dinner ready yet? Before I knew it, I was being treated like a convenient housekeeper, constantly ordered and directed. Worse yet, his demands changed daily. One day, he complained the soup was too strong, so I made it lighter the next day, only to be yelled at for it being too weak. Experimenting, I served the same taste every day, only to be constantly criticized for it being too strong or too weak. I had felt it before, but perhaps he was just amusing himself by troubling me. That thought was disappointing. How childish he seemed. No matter what I did, Phil would quickly become angry, frequently hurling disrespectful words at me. Living this way made me desperately want to leave, to escape from Phil at the earliest opportunity. I've thought about it countless times since he changed. But there's a reason I can't leave. It's because of an outstanding mortgage. Phil quit his job suddenly without treason and now spends his days idly at home. Despite this, he never helps with the housework. When I return from work, I find a floor littered with empty alcohol cans and snack wrappers. As a result, we're getting by on my earnings. In truth, we had just recently rebuilt our house. I provided all the funds for it. I keep the household account book, monitoring our financial situation. I've been diligently saving up, gathering funds for the house construction. I can't just leave the house I worked so hard to build. If I leave, it becomes Phil's. On top of the mortgage, there's another important reason. This house is a place filled with my hopes and dreams. The exterior, interior, and facilities were all designed according to my wishes. What I particularly like is the spaciousness of the kitchen. Our kitchen is very spacious, making it a comfortable environment for cooking. During meetings with the designer, Phil frequently interjected his opinions, but when I firmly said, I'm providing the funds, so I'd like my wishes to be considered a bit, he fell silent. Months passed, and despite various difficulties, our house was finally completed. Not all my wishes could be met due to budget constraints, but still, our ideal home was built. I am very satisfied with the outcome. However, on the flip side, we ended up with a large mortgage due to going over budget. Having a substantial mortgage in my 50s is tough, but thinking about my dream home gives me strength. Despite it being a new home, Phil seemed dissatisfied that his opinions weren't much reflected. He complained, "This facility is unnecessary. It's a waste of money." But he gradually stopped grumbling when I ignored him. Instead, he started to leave trash around and deliberately dirtied the room. Was it out of spite? When will this situation improve? These thoughts weigh on me as I go through my days. A few months after building the house, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. There were no visitors scheduled for today. Who could it be? As I started to move slowly towards the entrance, Phil suddenly stood up as if he realized something and hurried toward the door. There was a sense of anticipation in his behavior. After a while, cheerful and lively conversation could be heard from the entrance, growing louder over time. When the living room door opened slowly, unexpected visitors were there. What? Father and mother. Yes, there stood my somewhat difficult to handle father-in-law, Henry, and mother-in-law, Debbie. When we first met, they had thrown demeaning words at me. At our wedding, they even complained about trivial things. Their interference continued afterward, causing me much distress. Recently, our contact had decreased, and I thought we had found some peace. But then this visit happened, even though I politely said hello. They passed by as if I was air, deliberately bumping into my shoulder. "Look, isn't this house wonderful? I want you to see various things here." Phil eagerly spoke. "What a nice house. How happy one must be living in such a lovely place. The kitchen is so spacious and functional," exclaimed my mother-in-law. "Indeed, it's enviable. I can see why you two would be comfortable here," praised my father-in-law. Phil showed them around the house, explaining features that piqued their interest. When they returned to the living room, there was a satisfied smile on my in-laws' faces. However, in contrast to the cheerful atmosphere, Phil scolded me loudly. "Hey, aren't the coffee and snacks ready yet? How can you make my parents wait?" Rushed by his angry voice, I hurried to prepare the coffee and snacks. But since there was no prior notice of the visit, I had to serve whatever snacks I had on hand. This made them upset. "What kind of joke is this when your husband's parents are visiting? Really? Always a petty woman." They expressed their dissatisfaction but finished all the coffee and snacks provided. "This house seems really comfortable to live in. Dad and Mom, you're always welcome. Don't hesitate to come." After that, they left without saying thanks for the meal or anything else. Ultimately, their attention was solely on Phil, only glancing at me when expressing their complaints. After they left, I realized something. It had been a long time since I saw Phil laugh so brightly. From that day on, at Phil's invitation, they began visiting frequently. Initially, it was about twice a month, but gradually it increased to once a week, and eventually, they started coming almost daily. Most of what they said during their visits were complaints about me. Phil never defended me. He just nodded along with his parents' remarks. He even agreed with his parents' opinions and complained about me. Rachel really doesn't listen to what I say. It's troubling me. Rachel is really a high-maintenance person. I felt it since we first met, but to see her troubling my son like this, I never intended to trouble them. In fact, I am the one who is troubled. Yet, I couldn't convey this and merely apologized. Their visits seemed to continue. I couldn't be sure because they visited when I wasn't around, and I didn't see them every day. Nevertheless, they seemed to drink alcohol during the day, and when I came home, empty cans were scattered on the floor. The newly bought rug had stains from spilled drinks. Could you at least clean up the empty cans? The new house smells of alcohol, and there are stains on the floor, which is troublesome. Quiet. You should just keep earning money in silence. Just do as I say, okay? Understand? Really now. It seemed he didn't realize who was earning the money for the alcohol. Besides alcohol, Phil also spent money on gambling. Occasionally, I would find crumpled betting tickets next to the alcohol cans. When I realized Phil was gambling, I tried to advise him. We didn't have financial leeway in the first place. If he continued to waste money on gambling, our situation would only worsen. It's one thing if it were his income, but using the money I earned, I feel more sadness than anger. Weeks have passed since his parents began visiting frequently. They would still come when I was not home. How should I turn this situation around? Sometimes when I came home early from work, I would find them brazenly using my home's facilities. I let out a surprised "dah," and when they noticed me, they clicked their tongues. My presence seemed to be an annoyance to them. Yet, this is my place. There's no reason for me to be treated as an unwanted presence. How should I overcome this difficult situation? I was already at my limit taking care of Phil, let alone dealing with his parents. Finally, I decided to confront Phil and his parents and began to formulate a plan. A few weeks later, they unusually visited while I was home. "Hello. It's rare for you to come when I'm here," I said sarcastically, and they gave me a sharp look. "If we knew you were here, we would have changed our visiting time. You always look so unremarkable." It was clear that my presence made them uncomfortable. They brushed past me and entered the living room confidently. "There you are. We've been waiting." Phil greeted his parents with a smile and led them to the kitchen. They seemed to think of this place as their home. In the kitchen, Debbie happily operated the equipment. "This kitchen is nice. I can't wait to use it. The food Mom makes here will surely be exquisite." After tinkering with the appliances, they said, "Let's check the bathroom next," and proceeded there. Inspecting the facilities of our house, which they had visited frequently, felt strange. It was as if they were doing a final check. With a look of anticipation, they left the house. "What were you doing? That's none of your business. Keep your mouth shut." Even when I asked what he had been up to, Phil told me nothing. But it doesn't matter if he doesn't tell me. The reason is that I was fully aware of what Phil and his parents were planning. Phil tried to keep his plan from me, but his attempts were so comical that I couldn't help but smirk when he wasn't looking. 1 week later, when I returned from work, a large truck was parked in front of our house. It had "Moving Center" written on its side. When I made eye contact with Phil standing next to the truck, he completely ignored me and went inside the house with the movers. Uncertain whether it was the right time to enter, I stood outside and watched, just as his parents arrived. "Oh, you're already here, Dad. Quick, let's go inside." After a brief glance at me, my in-laws, treating me as if I were invisible, entered the house without exchanging any words with me. Minutes passed, and the movers left. The three of them watched the truck leave with satisfaction. Once the truck was out of sight, they turned their attention to me. "Oh, Rachel, you're back? We didn't notice at all." "Really? When did you get back?" Pretending to be innocent, they approached me. "We need to talk. Please, come inside." As I stepped in, I noticed that most of the furniture had been replaced with items from Phil's parents' house. My beloved shelves and desk were gone, likely taken away by the movers. Sitting on the newly replaced sofa, the three of them stared at me with an eerie smile. We have an important discussion to make. You have no right to oppose now, so just listen quietly. An important talk. When I questioned back, Phil, with a sneering tone, said, I've sold this house to my parents. Let's get a divorce. I don't need you anymore. As soon as he finished his sentence, his parents chimed in, exactly right. So, from today, you are a stranger to us. Strangers should leave promptly. Debbie's words were followed by Phil and Henry's laughter. Did you hear that? You're a stranger, so get out. Mom, that's really funny. Yes, she's a stranger now, so she should leave quickly. This house is no longer yours. While saying this, Phil handed me the already filled out divorce papers. However, I wasn't fazed at all. I had anticipated all of this. Understood. Then let's proceed with the divorce. I'll sign the divorce papers now. I signed quickly, placed my wedding ring on the table, stood up, and declared, I will move out now. My calm demeanor seemed to dumbfound the remaining three. There's a solid reason why I could remain so composed. I had installed surveillance cameras all around the house. When his parents started visiting frequently and kept talking about living here, I grew suspicious. Their increasing visits and specific timings raised my doubts, making me suspect a conspiracy with Phil, which led me to install the cameras. At first, I hesitated. Is it permissible to monitor one's family like this? I feared that if nothing untoward was happening, I would be the one criticized. But, driven by daily stress, I finally decided to install the cameras. I could check the footage from these cameras on my smartphone at any time. Whenever I took a break, I started checking the footage. On the first day, there was no significant change. His parents visited, and they engaged in casual conversation with Phil. The focus of the conversation was Phil's daily grievances, and his parents just nodded sadly. So you've been feeling that way. Truly, she is no good, causing her husband such distress. The video also captured their voices clearly. Have they forgotten who have been supporting the household? Since installing the cameras, I've been pondering how they will manage their living after I'm gone. Days later, the screen showed Phil and his parents in an unusually cheerful mood. What had happened? Listening carefully, it sounded like Phil was discussing selling his house to his parents. When I first heard this, I thought it was a joke, but the discussions about selling the house continued the next day, and the day after that. It became undeniable that Phil indeed intended to sell the house to his parents. His parents were enthusiastic about the plan, discussing various projects like buying new furniture and making the house barrier-free. After hearing these conversations, I secretly began looking for a new house. The surveillance footage recorded the mover's schedule and the divorce plans. I prepared to move to a new place in time for the day I would be driven out. I also initiated the process to change the name on the mortgage contract. Since the divorce was decided, the house was no longer mine. Therefore, I thought it appropriate to transfer the payment responsibility to Phil and his parents. The mortgage I was paying was $2,800 a month. I doubted they could afford it, but that was to be their problem after we get divorced. I intended to refuse any requests for financial assistance. Driven out from home, I headed to my new residence. New furniture was already arranged there, and I was ready to start a new life. Exhausted, I collapsed into bed and fell into a deep sleep. Luckily, the next day was a holiday. Relieved to have started a new life away from Phil, I slept longer than usual and woke up past noon. I couldn't recall the last time I slept so soundly since getting married. I was hungry but still felt sleepy. Just as I considered sleeping a bit more, the doorbell rang. When I responded, I saw an enraged Phil and his parents. What? Why are they here? I didn't recall sharing this address. How did they find this place? Without giving me time to wonder, they barged in. Then, they suddenly produced a document. What's this? A notice for changing the mortgage name? Yes, that's right. I no longer live in that house, and effectively, we are strangers. Even so, right after I moved, they received the notice for the mortgage name change. They seemed shocked by the amount. We have no income right now. How can we pay $2,800 a month? That's right. Our pension isn't that much. They pleaded as if it was all my fault. Beside them, Phil nodded as if agreeing. No matter how much they blamed me, the situation wouldn't change. Maybe the house was a bit luxurious, but it's true that we went over the budget. But who was it that neglected to seek information and lazed around every day? Moreover, they themselves were trying to forcefully acquire a house that belonged to someone else. Had they known the actual amount of the mortgage, they probably would have reconsidered. While I remained silent, Phil, visibly angry, crumpled the document and approached me. Just so you know, I have no intention of paying such an amount. Leaving those words behind, he threw the document onto the floor. His parents remained silent about the situation, seemingly unaware of what non-payment of the mortgage would entail. I hadn't expected adults to lack such basic knowledge. You're free to choose not to pay, but do you understand the consequences? You'll end up having to pay it anyway, won't you? They seemed to misunderstand that I would ultimately be responsible for the payment. So, I elaborated on the specific consequences of not paying the mortgage. In fact, if you don't pay, late fees will be added. That means you'll need to spend more than $2,800 each month. Do you understand? Is that some kind of joke? Unbelievable. You're the ones who are misunderstanding. Why don't you check the details yourself? After that, Henry encouraged Phil to verify, and Debbie showed a similar response. Seconds passed, and Phil's expression gradually turned serious as he started operating his smartphone. I can't believe this is happening. I told you the cost would increase if you delay. You can find this information online. The three of them stared at Phil's smartphone. Debbie was the first to speak up. We don't have any money. Oh, right. What about savings? What's happening with the division of assets? There are none. Since Phil hasn't been working and squandered everything on gambling, there are no assets left to divide. I stated this definitively, causing Phil's face to turn even paler. So, I recommend you give up and look for a job. It's a waste of time to linger here. What do you mean? We've been together for years. Don't you think you should help out a bit? Do you realize how much we've supported you? I had no memory of being supported. I couldn't recall any assistance from his parents. I haven't received any help. I communicated this clearly and understandably, but they kept pleading, trying to rebuild our familial relationship and revive our marriage. I found it bothersome to even engage with them anymore. I forced the noisy trio outside and called the police, reporting that there were loud people outside. I treated their complaints as if it was someone else's problem. Indeed, in reality, they were now strangers. As a result, they were taken away by the police for causing a disturbance outside my house. After the police inquiry, they decided they couldn't afford the mortgage for economic reasons and moved to a small apartment out of town. I heard they finally understood the importance of working and were striving to find jobs, though unsuccessfully. Phil, however, managed to find a part-time job and was barely supporting the two of them with his modest income. As for me, I'm busy with work, but started a blog about my handmade crafts, which has doubled my income. The blog has received a lot of positive feedback, and I've been getting more requests to teach at handcraft workshops. Now, I prioritize living an independent life over marriage. During this time, I found the household ledger from when I was living a frugal life. The memories. I felt a wave of nostalgia. Those challenging days are now a valuable experience. I vowed to seize happiness with my own hands and put the ledger away.